Good morning, everyone. Minneapolis. I'm so excited to be here with you live and in person. It feels great saying that, actually. My name is Rukia Sheikh-Mohamed. I'm a software engineer at a local startup here, which has locations across the country called Suna. We are a content creation company making the internet more beautiful. I will touch on that a little bit later. I'm a fashion and food lover, speaker at local and national tech conferences, and a mama bear to my lovely son. And all of these photos are actually shot at Suna, and I'll tell you how you can get that too. Before I dive in, I want to share a fun fact. About 5 years ago, I gave my first ever talk on this exact stage. It was an Ignite talk in Thank you. Thank you. It was an Ignite talk like the ones y'all saw yesterday in 2017. That talk experience sparked something in me. It made me realize my passion for sharing things I've learned with the broader tech community. It meant a lot to me for a very junior person, fresh out of boot camp, on my first gig, to be invited to a platform like this. And just to share my thoughts, I really want to give a warm thank you to Bridget, the conference organizers, and the DevOps community for allowing me to do that. Thank you. So I'm just going to dive in. So we learned that it works. So in software, there was something that came up about that we wouldn't release software every 2 years. We realized that that wasn't really productive. We learned that it works better to have rapid iteration of releasing your features and your product more continuously. We benefited a lot. We found our potential defects early and dealt with it. Progress happens more often. The feedback loop became much quicker. It was more cost-effective. Testing got easier, and my favorite, the morale of the folks working on the product increased because they actually saw their work being tested, used, and released much quicker, just to name a few. Rapid iteration is something we know is valuable, but how do we take that from software to people? My talk today will share a few tips specifically on how we can iterate together. I believe, like a lot of people have shared the past couple of days, that one of the most important aspects of software are the people, not just the people using your software, but all of you, the people working on the software. It is important for me. Okay, so our tip number 1 is to respect each other's skills. It is important to be aware of your own skills, but equally as important to be aware of your teammates' skills. Once you are aware, you can value and respect those skills. An example of this is, in my department, I'm usually tasked to help onboard and pair with new developers on a specific feature. I just want to pause here. One, this specific time around, I was helping onboarding and pairing session with a person who is a staff engineer, and he's focused mainly on the front-end design. Like, that's his expertise. And I started onboarding similar like I normally do, but I just want to share that there's 2 things that I noticed right away. One, I got in my head a little bit. I was like, how am I going to help a staff engineer? He's more advanced than me. This is his expertise. Plus, I didn't really feel comfortable in the front-end design. I'm a back-end leaning engineer, so CSS is hard for me. Anyone else think CSS is hard? I'm glad I'm not the only one. So those are a couple things that were running in my head in the beginning. But, I kind of tried to push that aside. I started my onboarding and pairing session like I normally do. I focused on trying to understand the new person's strengths, their skills, and their comfort level. During that, I learned that he was ready to learn a lot about the back end, but he also wanted to get his hands-on experience with the front-end styling. I started walking him through the data structure, the back-end logic, all the way to the front end, info he needed for that specific feature, and how it connects to the entire app. Things were going good during our pairing session until I overlooked a few things. I had to understand and respect my own skills on being an expert in our code base, the product feature we were working on, and my ability to onboard and pair successfully with new developers. I also had to respect the new developer skills for being an expert and passionate about front end. He had initiative, and he was good at jumping right in. Another thing that I also had to keep in mind was it's equally as important to think of your strengths, but also your weaknesses. I want to point out here, it's not about the other person's weakness. It's about focusing on your own weakness. One weakness that I had is I felt intimidated that, like I mentioned earlier, that I was helping a staff engineer, plus it was in an area that I wasn't super comfortable in. I also realized that I needed to be able to understand my teammate's skills because he really liked this specific aspect and he was good at it. And instead of making that an area of friction, it can be an area where you all can lean on each other. So lean on your teammates' strengths. That's something that's really important. And finally, we realized that what we can do together is there's a concept in pair programming that I use at my company, and it's about somebody is a driver and somebody is the navigator. What that basically means is when you're pairing with somebody is typing the code and the other person is navigating them through solving the problem. So in the areas where I felt more comfortable, I allowed my colleague to be the driver and I was the navigator, and vice versa. And that really helped us lean onto each other's strengths. I also want to mention here that respect is not only right, but it's also productive. Because in the end, he got better in his area that he wasn't comfortable with, and I actually leveled up my CSS skills. So that is step number one. The step number two is trust. For example, trust is very important on your team because I can't just work on sloppy, untested code and just hand it to DevOps and expect that it would work. Over time, the DevOps engineer is going to find a hard time trusting the work I hand over. We have to make sure that when you check something in, it works and it doesn't cause more work we have to make sure that when you check something in, it won't break someone else's work or cause more work for somebody else. We've all been there, right? I know I have. So something that I've learned over time that really helps me with establishing and continuing to grow trust is this concept in conscious leadership called clean agreements. A clean agreement is a concept that is it's a mutual agreement between specific people who is clarified on the who, the what, going to do what, by when, and it needs to be clear. So in this situation, the scenario of handing over ready to deploy features to DevOps, the DevOps engineer is very frustrated, okay? And the dev team the DevOps engineer is very frustrated and the dev team keeps sending over untested code. The dev team can sense tension, frustration, and lack of trust between the two teams. So during a retro conversation, it's had around having buggy, untested code, causing issues during the release and more work for DevOps. We brainstormed some ideas, and during a retro, we discovered that, okay, we have a solution, a possible solution. The developers, the who, will start on implementing automated testing using Cypress for any future code and bug fixes by the next release, the when. So in here, it is very clear who is going to do what and by when. Then the DevOps and the devs actually agree to this agreement. So this is an example of a clean agreement where all parties mutually agree. Over time, this has actually helped the two teams increase trust and respect. But wait, like we already know, prod is down. And there's one bug that we need to release a hotfix for. And the devs don't have time to write an extensive Cypress test. So I bet you're wondering, we have that clean agreement, Rukia, what do we do? You can actually revisit that clean agreement and have a renegotiation. So what that looks like is the developers tell the DevOps team that, hey, y'all, we don't have time to do this, but we'll make a follow-up ticket right away, and we'll resolve it once production is back up. And then the DevOps team agrees to that, and it works. It ends up working out, and that is something that they continue to do in their software lifecycle, and it has helped increase trust between the two teams. I'll also like to add, an added benefit of having clean agreements is if any of those three things are not clear, like the who, the what, and the when, you should actually question yourself that, hey, you might want to actually go back to product or go back to your manager or go back to the stakeholders and try to gather that information. Personally, this has helped me a lot increase trust when working with other engineers and anyone on my team. The way that trust shows up is actually being consistent every day. And when something comes up, trying to communicate early and often. When we trust and believe in one another, we can accomplish great things. Similar to software iteration, if the who, the what, and the when is not clear, or things get confusing, or it doesn't work, continue to communicate and revisit your clean agreements, or make new ones. Like, similar to software iteration, nothing is static. We can continue to try new things and see we do it right, and then we do it better. We can continue doing that with our people interactions as well. Okay, step number 3, supporting each other. Supporting your teammates means that they can rely on you. It can show up in many ways. It can show up in you're working on something and somebody is supporting you through words of encouragement. You're working on a really long drawn-out bug fix, and they just give you words of encouragement. Another way support can show up is actually listening to somebody. Sometimes people don't even need you to say something and come up with a solution. They just want to talk to you. We've all know the concept of rubber ducking. This is just, sometimes people just want to have a rubber duck where they can just get things out and they'll figure it out along the way. We can also support each other by helping them, helping people on their projects, helping people with bug fixes. If you know somebody had a long on-call week, how can you help them the next morning where they might be super exhausted? Another way is actually going in there and getting your hands dirty and trying to help them put out the fire, collaborating with them. I like to point out that it might be really difficult to help support someone if you don't, and figure out their needs if you don't know their needs. Getting to know somebody is a good place to start. Active listening, this is where active listening comes in. I can't tell you how many times I heard something, but I wasn't listening, and I missed a lot of very important information. It is helpful to be mindful and give space to people so you can authentically gain insight. Like this image, these two people are talking to each other, and they're sharing words, but they're not, their backs are turned metaphorically because they're not listening. A quote that resonates with me when getting to know people and helping and figuring out their needs is, "Words are made of silver and silence is made of gold." When getting to know how to support someone, go for the gold. Listen more than you speak. Okay, so I'm going to tell another story. One sprint, I was working on a very meaty architecture feature. This feature required me to create a proposal, to present to stakeholders, and to try to automate a very tedious manual process, which involved data models, ERDs, technical requirements, and a bunch of other stuff. This experience was a great example of my teammates supporting me because of a few things. What happened was that it all started from a conversation, a one-on-one coffee, and the PM and me were just catching up. The PM asked me, "Hey, Rukia, what are your goals? What are your aspirations?" And I said, something that I'm really passionate about in software is I really like to automate something that is so annoying. Like, we could just create a solution to help people save time. Because for me, it's really about working smarter, not harder. I went on to say that I'm really also passionate about the bigger picture of things. I want to architect a technical solution to present that I can solve, or I can hand it over to somebody else to solve this problem. A few weeks later, and I think it was maybe a couple of months, this same teammate reached back out to me. They're like, "Hey, Rukia, in the next sprint, you're going to work on a technical spike to have a technical proposal for a specific, you're going to architect a solution and propose this to the stakeholders." And I was like taken aback by that because, one, it was so nice to have this colleague listen to what I wanted and what I needed, but she also found me a tangible solution. She went above and beyond to find how I can get my goals into the roadmap. So I think sometimes we often overlook something that's obvious. Talking to somebody in a simple virtual coffee is something that you might think might not mean a lot. But because of that, this colleague and she was able to support me by I got to, express myself and kind of see where I wanted to go in this technical realm. And also, they were able to find tangible solutions for me to learn and grow myself in my career by putting that in the roadmap for me. And it all started from a conversation. Sometimes, like I said, something obvious can really benefit you. Another way that supporting showed up in this project, this specific project, was that I had to really refine my proposal. So I had two technical options. They could either do option 1 or option 2. And I just needed to bounce that idea off of somebody. So I went to one of my colleagues who's very insightful and wise, and I talked them through. We had a really good collaboration session. They gave me feedback. It was very honest. It was kind. It was clear. And with that collaboration, I was able to iterate on my proposal. I was able to, the first thing I did was, like I said earlier, do it, then do it right, and then do it better. So I was able to come up with a proposal. Then I refined it, and I did it right by talking to my colleague about it and getting feedback. And then I did it better by taking that feedback and actually implementing it. So those are just two examples of how support can show up and how you can support one of your colleagues. Tip number 4, the last point I would like to talk about is provide feedback early and often. Feedback is one of the most crucial things that we know when developing software. When you're putting out a new product or you're putting out a new feature, you rely on feedback to actually make it better or to know where to change. Feedback is, I think, one of the foundation of these 4 steps on how we can iterate together, because we think about it all the time in software, but why don't we should also think about it when it comes to people. We think about user experiences when it comes to software, but we should also think about what is the user experience of being on your team. We think about health checks when it comes to software. What is the health check of your team? So that's why these steps are really important. So for feedback, I want to just share a few tips. With the raise of hands, if you read this meme real quick, how many people have felt this? Because I have. Like when somebody is trying to give you legitimate feedback and you're like, maybe not now. I believe feedback is most helpful when given early and often. For example, instead of waiting 2 weeks when the projects are wrapping up, the team can have a higher, instead of waiting 2 weeks to give feedback, the team can have a higher impact of change and pivot if you tell them within the first 2 days. It saves, the feedback loop gets shorter and the person can iterate on that much quicker. The feedback loop allows us to constantly think about how we can do things better and iterate. For example, in code reviews, let's say you have a code review. One thing about code reviews is, in order to give really productive feedback, you need to know the person that you're reviewing. It goes back to that point I mentioned about getting to know the people you work with. Because some people, they want you to suggest, they work better when you suggest something. And some people want to have a discussion. But I also think it's really helpful, like when you have a really in-depth problem and you might not know the context, to maybe just hop on a call and do like a live, in real-time code review, because then you can save maybe 2 days of GitHub messages and Slack back and forth with just a 20-minute conversation. That's just one example. Another one is giving feedback early. Giving feedback early is really important because have you ever been in a situation where, have you ever been told that something you've done weeks ago, but you've only been told about it like months later? And that's not really productive for the person, because a couple things happen there. One, you actually rob the person from implementing changes during that time that you just kept it to yourself. Also, you're going to start to foster all of these things and make all these assumptions because you just hold on to it. It's cooking inside of you. It's like a fire inside of you where it's just going to keep getting lit the longer you wait. And I'm not saying you should tell somebody as soon as something pops in your head. That's not a great idea either. Maybe be mindful and try to tell this person in a kind way. But waiting for a really long time is not really productive. How would it be for us from a software standpoint if our users told us a year after we deployed a new product, hey, this sucks, or something like, oh, this button doesn't work. Like, that would be so unproductive, and it wouldn't allow us to take our software to the next level. So we should also think about that when it comes to people. I'm gonna share a story here. One thing I actually learned around this story that I'm gonna share is that when something happens to you and you don't like it, like let's say somebody gave you feedback after 3 months, like they held on to something, and it was a simple misunderstanding. Something I learned this weekend was a great way to put that is when somebody does something to you that hurts you or you don't like, try to make a promise to yourself that you won't repeat that cycle to somebody else. Because a lot of times we just repeat things that people have done to us. We've had bad code reviews, so we give bad code reviews. We've had people hold on to really helpful feedback, so we don't tell people. And I know, y'all, we're in Minnesota, there's this concept of Minnesota nice, but that just goes to my next thing. Minnesota being, having a concept of a poop sandwich. Has anyone ever heard of that? It's like you layer the feedback, like you say really positive things. I notice this happens a lot in Minnesota. You say really positive things in the beginning, then you put in the constructive criticism somewhere in the middle, and then you end it up with positive things. And it's kind of, it sounds good, right? Because you're like, oh, you know, this person's lowering the blow, but it's actually not helpful because it's confusing, it's not straightforward, and it's not helpful. Like, for example, when somebody tells you, actually, I don't have an example for this. I have an example for the point before this. Around, okay, so back when I was a little bit more junior, my senior engineer that was kind of mentoring me, they waited until like the last part of a specific project, which took months, maybe 2 to 3 months, to tell me, hey, you don't ask the right questions. And I was confused, and I did a whole talk about this. You can find it online, but it was really around the lines of, you know, they teach you in life that there's no such thing as a dumb question. But there's also things that are, there's such a thing as not a constructive question. And I was really confused because I actually wish that this senior engineer at the time told me on like week 1 or week 2 that, hey, Rukia, you should work on the way that you ask questions. Ask open-ended questions. Don't ask yes or no questions. But he waited 3 months to do that. And that really, like I said, it kind of hindered me in that specific project because I wasn't able to take the feedback and make changes about it because the project was done. I didn't have time to make changes. So, okay, now that I'll move on to this being candid. Being candid is very important when it comes to feedback. Don't sugarcoat things. What does that mean? Being candid means being truthful and straightforward. I know some people might think like being truthful and straightforward is a little harsh sometimes, but it's not. It is actually productive. It closes that feedback loop. Imagine, like I said, your customers gave you very ambiguous poop sandwich feedback. You can't really do much about it. You really can't. So it's the same concept when it comes to people. And also, when you're giving feedback, try to put it in a way where it's not you versus them. It's you and me versus the issue. So the issue is what we're trying to solve together. And a lot of times when people are giving feedback and the people receiving the feedback, they take it personally because it might seem like you're trying to point at the person and not the problem. So sometimes in code reviews, if we go back to code reviews, this person, instead of saying, why would you do something like this? You could do it like this. Why don't you say, you can reframe that same feedback and say, you know, there's documentation around for loops. It's actually better and quicker, and it optimizes the database if you do it like this, you know? Like, reframe it for the issue and not the person. I actually wanted to tell a little bit more stories, but I'm actually blanking, so I hope that's okay. But I just want to summarize on how to iterate better together. It is very important to, 1, respect each other's skills, trust, 3, support each other, and 4, provide feedback early and often. And this The same way that we learned that releasing software every 2 years was not productive and it was not cost effective and it was not good for the morale of the team, we should also think about when working with people, when we don't iterate on any of these things and we just stay stagnant, we're just going to be in this box for 2 years and we're going to continue treating our team the same exact way, we're going to continue every retro, we're not going to have any action items. It's not productive. You're going to lose good people, you're going to lose money, and we all want to be successful. And I strongly believe that when we support each other, when we give each other feedback, when we trust each other and respect each other, we will all succeed together. And isn't that the most important thing at the end, where an organization wants to succeed? And I strongly believe that you can succeed with people. And I know I said I'll give you some tips on how you can, a little bit more about my company. So I really want to share that we are actually hiring a senior software engineer. So if you care about these kind of things and you want to work with people that care about it, please check it out. And you can also try Suna, get a really nice headshot like the one here. Or you can, if you have any products, and you can use my code Rukia. And you can also stay connected with me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I want to say thank you so much. Hopefully it won't be another 5 years till I'm back here, but I really appreciate y'all giving me the time and listening to what I have to say, and hopefully we can all iterate together.